Ever stayed somewhere so unsettling that every flicker of light felt like it was aimed directly at you? Some hotels carry more than just history in their walls. They carry the kind of presence you can't see but can definitely feel. What you're about to hear isn't a campfire tale or a scene from a vintage movie. It's a true encounter that turned an ordinary road trip into a night of pure fear. From vanishing figures in the corner of your eye to faucets turning on by themselves and a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. This is the kind of story that makes you think twice before getting an apartment. In the fall of 2016, during our first semester of college, my best friend Claire and I shared a small dorm room on the edge of campus. I was only 20 at the time. At first, it felt like any other new chapter in life, full of excitement and nerves. But as the weeks went on, strange occurrences began piling up until we could no longer ignore them. By the end of the year, both of us quietly admitted what neither of us wanted to say out loud. Something was wrong with that room. The first signs seemed harmless enough. Posters, photos, and other decorations we taped carefully to the walls never stayed put. No matter how many times we used stronger tape or added more putty, at least one thing would come crashing down in the middle of the night. The noise was startling, waking us suddenly from deep sleep with pounding hearts. One evening we were stringing lights above my bed, and I remarked that Claire's had stayed perfectly while mine never lasted. The instant I spoke, my lights collapsed all at once, as if yanked from the wall. Our beds faced the entryway, and more than once both of us confessed to feeling watched from that spot. It was not the typical unease of living in a shared space for the first time. It was the sense that someone else was there, lingering just out of reach. Sometimes, from the corner of our eyes, we caught the silhouette of a figure standing at the door, perfectly still, as if observing us. Other times, dark shapes flickered at the edges of our vision, vanishing the moment we turned to face them. Soon, little belongings started going missing. Keys, pens, hair ties, or bottles would be gone when we needed them, only to reappear hours later in odd places. More than once, items were found on the floor in the middle of the room, though neither of us had been near them. It was as if something unseen had caused them to fall. These things were small, but they added to the sense that we were not alone in our own space. Even worse were the noises. Almost every night we heard loud knocking, heavy footsteps, and the thud of something large moving around above us. Naturally, we assumed it was the students in the room upstairs, so we climbed up and knocked on their door. The two guys who lived there looked confused, insisting they never made that much noise. They even wrote us a note later, apologizing for something they claimed they had no part in. The night we finally believed them came during a particularly loud episode, when the ceiling above us shook as if something heavy moved. Frustrated, Claire and I stormed out and decided to grab food from the cafeteria. To our surprise, there were the two upstairs neighbors already sitting down, casually eating a late dinner. They smiled at us, clearly unaware that at the same moment their supposed stomping shook our room, they were right in front of us. When we reported this to our resident assistants, they brushed it off, insisting the guys upstairs were the only possible culprits. The building layout left no other explanation. Still, we could not reconcile what we heard with what we knew. The guilt of accusing the neighbors sat heavy, especially since they later showed us their class schedules, proving they were often away during the times we heard the noises. The experience that unsettled me most was not in waking life, but in a dream. One night, I found myself outside our own room in my sleep. In my dream, it felt like I was being guided by something unseen. My attention was drawn to Claire, and an eerie, unexplainable feeling came over me. She sat up suddenly, letting out a sharp cry that jolted me awake, drenched in sweat, trembling. I stared at her sleeping form for what felt like hours, afraid that she might suddenly wake up in panic. That nightmare shook me so badly that I refused to sleep for 2 nights. Even after exhaustion forced me to close my eyes, I dreaded slipping back into that same perspective. I feared not only the dream itself, but the feeling that something beyond me might have influenced it. The thought that I could somehow hurt my friend's feelings frightened me. After we moved out, the pieces fell into place. Our dormitory stood right next to the old Chi Omega house, the site of a mysterious event rumored to have happened decades earlier. Claire had always been sensitive to the paranormal. Her family believed she carried that ability, and several psychics over the years had told her she was unusually receptive to spirits. I had brushed off her experiences before, chalking them up to her imagination. But after a year in that room, I could not deny the evidence. Whatever was there seemed drawn to her, and somehow it began to affect me, too. Years later, the memory of that room still unsettles me. I can still picture the string lights dropping the moment I joked about them, or the phantom thumping overhead when no one was there. Worst of all, I can still recall the vivid dream, the sickening sensation of crawling across the floor with a strange urge I couldn't explain. I left that dormitory behind, but a part of me wonders if the energy there still festers, waiting for the next set of students who think they are just moving into a normal college room. Ever moved into a college dorm thinking the worst you'd deal with was noisy neighbors or a bad roommate? That's what I expected too. But what I got instead was something I couldn't explain. Objects crashing in the night, shadows standing where no one should be, and a dream so vivid it felt like possession. What started as freshman year jitters turned into the kind of feeling that still lingers with me years later. I had ghostly experiences in an old dorm. I was 22 years old in my third year in college, and also happened to be one of the RAs in this house on campus. My school is on an island off the coast of Maine, and most of the buildings, except the new dorms, are converted New England mansions and cottages, some built in the 1800s. The house I was in is a converted mansion complete with a servant's quarters and nursery. I was the senior RA, so I got the old master bedroom, which was at the far end of the house next to a fire escape. Prior to classes starting, the RAs go through a training week. It was actually 2 weeks, and everyone stays in this house, since it's the biggest, and then move to their respective houses at the end of training. The other RAs all stayed in the servants' quarters, more fun, I guess. So other than feeling a little lonely on my side of the house, I was content to unpack throughout the week on my own. Things started about 3 days into training when I started finding colorful craft feathers inside my stuff. As in, I'd open a sealed box and there would be a craft feather there, or I'd take out a pair of pants from a drawer and underneath I'd find a feather. They were always tucked away except one that was in the middle of my floor. It was odd, but I chalked it up to mice in the house and disregarded it. Then one night early on, I was awakened to footsteps in the hall. My immediate thought was that something was wrong, and another RA was coming to get me. There was no other reason someone would be down here at this time. I took note of the time, 2:00 a.m. on the dot. I could hear the footsteps come up to the door, and then nothing. I was a little spooked, but I figured I'd ask about it in the morning. Next morning, none of the RAs admitted to walking down my hall at that hour, so I let it go. Until, that night, it happened again. The footsteps woke me up, and again it was 2 a.m. on the dot. Then it happened the following night. I started to get freaked out until someone suggested it could be a night watchman. Because this school is a total hippie college, we didn't have proper security on campus, but we did have 2 old Mainers who did nightly rounds. They would walk through the dorms' public spaces and check that alarms were working, nobody needed anything, etc. Great guys. Knew them by name, and they were always friendly. Of course, it had to be them, the timed footsteps, the fact that my room was beside the fire escape. They probably went down those stairs, and I just couldn't hear them. I decided I would meet the night watchman at 2 a.m. so I could put this behind me. I set my alarm for 1:55 a.m. and propped my door open, turned on all my lights, sat on my bed, and waited for the night watchman to come my way. At 2 a.m. I hear footsteps approaching. They are getting close until it sounds like they are right at my door, but there's no one there. I get up and I go to my door and look down the hallway. Nobody is there. Because I'm really scared and need a rational explanation, I call out, "Hello, who's there?" Immediately, everything that I had on my door, my name tag, RA papers, the little door signs on my doorknob, everything falls off all at once. Scared, I shut and locked my door and kept the lights on all night. In the morning, I tell my fellow RAs and they are all laughing at me, thinking I have an overactive imagination. I suspected maybe they were pranking me. But then things escalated. Fast forward to orientation week. My house is all freshmen, so I know their schedules, which is pretty much in mandatory orientation sessions in the lecture hall. I decided I needed a nap before lunch, and went to my room and slept from 12 to 12:30. I would catch the end of lunch before they stopped serving at 1 p.m. I am completely alone in the house. I wake up with my alarm at 12:30 and head out to lunch. I decide to cross all the way through the servants' quarters because their fire escape chalk external door dumps out to the main path. To get to the servants' quarters, I have to pass through the other main rooms, and then there is this sort of threshold that has a large bathroom between the house sections. As I pass by, the door handle is turning back and forth like someone is stuck inside. Despite my weird experiences, my first thought is that someone is legitimately stuck in the bathroom. It happened to a few RAs during training. The door is warped and doesn't fit in the frame perfectly. I knock on the door and say, "Hey, this door sticks, let me help you." But they ignore me and keep turning the knob and rattling the door. I knock and repeat my offer to help, but they continue. Then the door swings open and shuts again right in front of me. Then it opens again and slams in my face. Then it opens slowly and stays open. Because I'm dumb or just duty-bound, I feel like I need to check and make sure I don't have a resident stuck in there or something. I step inside the bathroom. There is no one in there. I run out of the house and to the dining hall and find my co-RA who lives in the servants' quarters of the house and tell her what happened. She just tells me there's a logical explanation. The window was probably open and caused a pressure difference. I'm shaken and tell her that couldn't be what happened. That night, to the amusement of my residents, I walk through the house and say out loud, "If there's any kind of presence here, let's live peacefully together, but we have to coexist peacefully. I'm uneasy and don't want to feel afraid. We can both live here, just please don't show yourself to me at night, and please let me sleep when I go to sleep." I felt like I needed to make boundaries, but I also didn't think I could ask it to leave. Things smoothed over. Sometimes I would get the feeling that something was in my room when I'd be studying, like a friend sitting down on my bed or something. When I was ready for bed, I'd announce it and it would feel like the presence would leave, but it could totally just be my brain making things up. Fast forward to Halloween. I've come down with pneumonia and am really unwell. I spent a day in the hospital and then was sent back to campus with meds. A couple days pass. My co-RA comes to check on me one night and asks me how I am doing. I tell her I'm getting there, but my room is a disaster, clothes and papers everywhere. I start to get up saying I'd feel better if I could just put the papers in one pile and the clothes in another. She tells me she'll help me do this tomorrow, but now I should sleep. I fall asleep, but am awakened by noises in my room. I also had a mouse problem, so I was careful never to leave food in my room. I realize maybe I forgot to bring a mug or something downstairs, so I turn on my headlamp to look for the source of the noise and deal with the plate or whatever. As I'm shining my headlamp, I see one of my sweaters slide across the floor, then a folder in the opposite direction, then more clothes and papers. Everything was sorting itself just like I wanted. I was terrified, so I say out loud, "I'm so grateful that you are trying to help me, but I am so sick and need to sleep. Please stop." And then everything stopped. I fell asleep. In the morning, my co-RA tells me I must have been feverish and did it myself. I guess it's possible, but I know what I saw, and I no longer had a fever at this point. The following year, I asked the head of buildings and grounds, who was here since the college opened, whether anyone died in that house. He told me before this was a college, the elderly owner of this house had passed away on the property. I'd love to believe it was his spirit just looking for a friend. I hope he's moved on now, but I have a sort of fondness for those spooky experiences. Nothing has happened to me since, so I really think there was something about that place. It's been 11 years since I've lived there. Ever tried to fall asleep in your dorm room, only to realize you weren't alone? That's what happened to my sister. What happened to her that night left more questions than answers, and a fear that even spring break couldn't shake. It was just after 2 in the morning when my phone rang, jolting me out of a dead sleep. On the other end was my 20-year-old sister Emily, crying so hard I could barely understand her. The hardest part was hearing her ask me what she should do, her voice trembling. She goes to school at a university in Ohio, and while nothing like this has ever happened to me personally, I knew she wasn't making it up. Emily told me that strange things had started happening in her dorm room about 2 weeks earlier. On back-to-back nights around 2:30 in the morning, she and her roommate heard a loud metallic crash in their room. It wasn't muffled like it came from outside the building. It was sharp and close, as if something heavy had dropped right there on their floor. Both times they searched the room from corner to corner and found nothing out of place. The following night, things escalated. Emily was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when she suddenly heard uneasy, fast breathing right near her face. She sat up quickly and asked her roommate why she was breathing like that. To her horror, her roommate responded that she was hearing the same thing, even though it wasn't coming from her. The second they spoke out loud, the sound stopped completely, leaving the room silent. After that, they were too afraid to sleep in the dark. They began keeping the television on at night, with the lights glowing in the background. For a while, that seemed to calm things down, and the room was quiet again. But tonight, everything changed. Emily's roommate had gone to sleep early while she stayed up finishing a paper on her laptop. The only light in the room came from the screen. When she finally closed it and laid back to rest, the bed shifted under her. Emily said she felt the mattress shift slightly, as if someone had sat down beside her. Terrified, she screamed and leapt out of bed, scrambling to turn on the lights. Nothing was there. Her roommate woke up in confusion as Emily called me, sobbing and shaking, desperate for advice. I tried to calm her down as best as I could. I told her to calmly say she wanted peace in the room, that it was not welcome there. Between tears, she repeated the words, though her voice lacked confidence. She was still terrified. I could hear how broken she sounded, and as her father it tore me apart. Emily decided she would sleep in a friend's room for the rest of the night, leaving her roommate behind. When I spoke to her again later, she gave me more details. It happened less than a minute after she had shut her laptop. She described feeling a sharp twinge in her stomach. Her roommate admitted that she was even more shaken than Emily, especially because she had always felt as though unseen eyes were watching her in that room. The roommate confessed that she no longer felt safe staying there alone. What frightened her most was that the presence had now crossed a boundary. Hearing footsteps or noises was one thing, but something seemed to touch Emily, though nothing visible could explain it, which made it all the more unsettling. She said she could not ignore it anymore. Emily told me her roommate cried when she heard what happened, repeating that it was different now, that whatever it was would not stop. I told them both to keep the lights and television on, to make sure the room was never silent at night. Luckily, Emily is coming home for spring break in just a few days, but I am still unsettled. I believe her completely, and I know she is not exaggerating. If the activity continues when she returns, I may have to reach out to someone at student housing. For now, the only comfort is that she is not alone in this, and I pray that leaving the room behind will put the experience to rest.